can do that while I'm doing this. Okay, admit all. Good. Hello and welcome. Welcome, everyone. I see Tony's here supporting Jude, and Evelyn's been waiting in the waiting room. Hello. And Seb's been coming regularly to the Meshworking room in the mornings, and Annalise is a regular community partner with us, always here supporting. And Nanda is coming in. Great, so welcome to the Meshworking room. We are going live on YouTube today on my YouTube channel. I'll put that link in the chat shortly so that we can share this out to our friends that way, just to switch from the Hague Center one. And so we're in the Meshworking room today for Peace Week 2022, and we're exploring this foundational narrative that helps us in our transformation towards a peaceful and regenerative world. It's this unitive narrative. So many evolutionary and forward-thinking people are putting these thoughts together and bringing this narrative forward to the world more and more as a foundation for us all. So today we have these explorers and sharers of the unitive narrative: Jude Currivan, Marilyn Hamilton, Marina Demchenko, and Lev Gordon, who are going to lead us in this discussion and share their stories about how we're putting that unitive narrative into practice. So good morning, thank you, and take it away.
Thank you so much for that welcome, Kara. I'm Marilyn Hamilton, and I am the founder of Integral City Meshworks and a co-initiator of Living Cities Earth. And I'm joined today by Dr. Jude Currivan, who is not only an evolutionary leader and an author, but also somebody who has co-initiated what we're calling the unitive narrative. I'd also like to welcome our guest, Marina Demchenko, who is actually joining us from Russia. And we're also joined by Lev Gordon, who's joining us from North America on the West Coast. So he's at a very early time of day, since I am in the Scottish eco-village of Findhorn, and it's just 12:30, just past noon here. So we're spread out in different time zones. Jude is a little bit further south of me, and so we're in the same time zone. Today, we've gathered to explore something that we're calling From Peace to Pieces, and looking to see how something that is a unitive narrative can release love into action. I would ask you, Kara, if you could just put up our PowerPoint, and that would help us just have an overview of what it is that we're going to do today. You know, one of the things that we have done as humans is that we have many stories. And our stories, when we especially look at the media, if you can turn to the next slide, please, Kara, that would be great. Then what we can see is that in the media, we're often being told stories that are merely fragmentary and divisive and help us to only think about separation. But we've called ourselves together today so that we could ask, is there a different approach? Could we discover that, in fact, we are inseparable? And what happens if we transform this perspective into a story of wholeness and interconnection? Would that mean that the United Nations, which has been seeking to aspire to this for 77 years, might in fact be able to find a way to bring a story together? We're curious, if we created a unitive narrative, could we bring together different voices and different cultures? And so we even thought, since I live in an eco-village where we're always saying that work is love in action, could we discover that this unitive narrative would itself open a door for their action being in the service of love? So I would like to invite Jude, who has been working with the evolutionary leaders as the co-initiator of this initiative of developing a unitive narrative, to help us to understand, how did this start, Jude? What is the big picture thinking that opened the inquiry? And I think you are very, very intimately connected to Gaia and have a new book coming out that actually talks about the story of Gaia. What has the unitive narrative got to do with that?
Thank you, Marilyn, and it's lovely to be with everyone. Just to take a step back, I'm a cosmologist. So basically, my lifelong curiosity has been the exploration of the nature of reality itself. So when we talk about from pieces to piece, we've been essentially having a paradigm of materialist separation as our worldview, and our worldview drives our behaviors. So essentially, our collective worldview has been fragmented. We've been in pieces. And so some while ago, about 18 months ago, a group of change makers associated with the United Nations for many decades came together to recognize that the implementation of the United Nations SDGs and what's known as Agenda 2030 was really not going to be able to be implemented from a mere aspiration for unity if a worldview that, was with those SDGs and the Agenda 2030 were effectively structured on separation. And in their own inner journeys, as well as outer journeys, they too had come to experience a deeper sense of wholeness, as Marilyn said, of inseparability with the world. So we came together some while ago, about 18 months or more ago now. And what came out of those early meetings was the need, the call, an urgent call for a unitive narrative that was essentially based on unity in diversity rather than separation, and a unitive narrative that could therefore underpin and frame that approach, that holistic approach, that interconnected approach to not just the SDGs and their implementation, but all transformational change around the world. The key thing that really, I think, enabled a unitive narrative to be drafted, articulated as we now have, is that scientific breakthroughs of the last few years and scientific evidence at all scales of existence and across many different fields of research, not just across the natural world as we might describe it, but also collective human behaviors, were revealing the same level of emergent understanding, that instead of a world of materialism, solely materialism and separation, those revelations, those revelatory scientific breakthroughs were indeed showing us what universal wisdom traditions, what indigenous teachings, what spirituality-based teachings have always told us, that fundamentally the nature of reality is unity, is unified. So we now have the scientific foundation for authentic approach to unitive awareness. And of course, it's completely congruent with all of those universal wisdom teachings. And this could only have happened because of those breakthroughs in the last few years. So from that initiation within the SDG thought leaders circle of the evolutionary leaders community, we started to sort of expand over the last 6 months this perception of what a unitive narrative could mean. Because if a worldview of separation drives a world of conflicts in a world of pieces and fragmentation, then a unitive narrative and its authentic foundation that our existential reality is unity in diversity, we feel can support, inspire, nurture, empower us all coming together to link up and lift up in service to love-based action and transformational change. And that essentially is both the essence and also the aim of a unitive narrative that recognizes, appreciates, and is empowered by our innate inseparability. And yet, of course, unity is not uniformity. Unity of our universal reality is expressed in radical diversity of our universe that literally, meaningfully exists and purposefully evolves as a unified entity from simplicity to complexity, and ever greater levels of self-awareness, interconnectedness, into being, that honors our inner and outer experiences of reality, that honors the complementarity of masculine and feminine attributes, that honors, invites, respects all voices in a diverse world, and where ultimately we are co-creators. We are microcosmic co-creators of this universal reality, and we stand now at a collective moment of choice. Do we stay in that materialist separatism and fall into fear and ever greater levels of potential fragmentation? Or do we come together based on a unitive narrative, underpinned and framed by it and by its foundational evidence and wisdom, to leap into love and to undertake this potential together of our conscious evolution? So that is the background. We're very much in its emergent way of being born and growing and evolving into the world. But I feel it offers us, at this momentous moment of choice, something to offer us authentic hope and empower us in all that we do together in service for the good of the whole.
Thank you, Jude. That's a beautiful way of framing the deep work that you have been doing. I know that this is during our Peace Week, and yesterday was the International Day of Peace. Would you like to say, Jude, maybe what kinds of discourses or interests besides yourself have been involved in this discussion? And I'm curious how you would see linking this to the United Nations.
Well, first of all, as I mentioned, Marilyn, that the unitive narrative came out of a group of more than 100 change makers, global change makers, very varied. And I think we've got a link here to the SDG Thought Leaders Circle unitive narrative. But on that website, it actually is a much wider resource of what these thought leaders are doing and who they are. So you see the breadth of expertise and involvement that's gone into all that we're doing together, not just to initiate the unitive narrative, but also to actually look at exemplars based on unitive awareness that are making differences across the world. And so what now has come forward is this application by 16 large NGOs across all United Nations civil society to come together to sign an application form on behalf of their organizations to the United Nations. At this time, the application went in 2 days ago, so during Peace Week, to call for what's known as a thematic cluster, which is a formal recognized grouping within the United Nations organizational structures based on unitive awareness, and therefore essentially founded on the unitive narrative. So we're hoping that in the coming weeks and months and years, when we begin to really engage with United Nations, that's one way of really sharing and spreading this message of unity in diversity more widely. The unity narrative has also been taken up by the Evolutionary Leaders Circle. And again, there's a link to who we are in the chat room, and the unitive narrative is embedded within our vision and purpose. And we're over 250, again, global evolutionary change makers and many organizations. And then the third link that's in the chat is the very recently set up unitive-narrative.org website, which is a group of folks from the evolutionary leaders who are very dedicated to how we share and spread the message of the unitive narrative in as many voices as possible, and also through many different, if you like, tributaries, as it were, of transformational change. And this includes now coming together with an emergent hollow movement, as it's being called, which is very new. And I think folks will hear much more about it in the coming weeks and months. But it's a movement based on the physicist David Bohm's understanding of unity and the holographic nature of reality 40 years ago. And it's basically a movement of movements where everyone is interdependent and following their own perspectives, but we come together in synergies. A book is coming out hopefully in March with many voices, including all I've mentioned in that book, and with chapters on the unitive narrative and how the hollow movement can be essentially the unitive narrative in action globally, and also how the hollow movement and the unitive narrative can underpin a new approach, a transformational approach to education and conscious business and many, many other ways of serving transformational change.
Thanks for that further information, Jude. It's really inspiring to think that there's so many large organizations who are coming together within the UN to create this unity cluster. I remember when I first started to interact with people active in the UN that I was introduced to the spirituality group. And I'm wondering if you expect that this unity cluster will have the same long-term kind of impact as that group has had within the UN.
I think it will. And in fact, some of those folks like Audrey Kitagawa, who was head of the Parliament of World Religions, people like Jonathan Granoff, who is part of Global Security Institute, people like Joni Carley, who's been very involved and is the representative at the United Nations for Unity Earth and Cosmos magazine. The Brahma Kumaris are one of the organizations that signed on to this application for the thematic cluster. So it's very much this congruence of, you like, secularity and spirituality, because this goes beyond that sense of secular or spiritual. It brings everyone together in this emergent new understanding that unity is our existential reality, and we now have the evidence for it. So it's a very exciting time that I think is really empowering, inspiring and empowering now, much more love-based action, because we have the traction, I think, and we have this unitive narrative to base that traction on.
Thank you for that explanation, Jude. I see that we're starting to get a few questions from the chat, and I'd also invite our other presenters here today, Marina and Lev, if you have any questions. I'll start with one from Annalise. She says she has a question about education. Does this mean that this would be a unitive narrative that could impact education remotely? Or I might ask her to explain a little bit further what she means about through communication. Is it a all-encompassing holistic approach to education that would come out of a unitive narrative?
It's very much that. It's very much the idea of hollow education, HOLO, in this sort of holographic movement on movements, is indeed that the unitive narrative can be used, as someone has said recently, almost like the backbone of the body of education. So just as a human body is a coherent collective community, so the unitive narrative can almost form a skeleton that underpins and strengthens all sorts of aspects of curricula. So, we're working Whole World View, which I'm co-founded, is working with organizations such as Loving Classroom, hopefully people like Reboot the Future, the Hague Centre, all the folks on our call here, certainly Integral Cities and Living Cities Earth, and many, many others, and through the evolutionary leaders, and City of Peace with Anne-Marie Verhova and Nina Meyerhoff and others in Poland, many, many others, to co-create and develop emergent curricula, experiential curricula education, that's founded on the unitive narrative, and realizing that for now and the future, education is fundamental to how we heal our worldview and our relationship with each other and Gaia, and also how learning and education is a co-creative, lifelong endeavor of curiosity and creativity and community. So this is what feels now has got some amazing opportunity and traction to move forward together.
I'm really inspired by your response. I know that as we've been exploring in this new initiative of Living Cities Earth, what would it be like to have children just naturally assume that this is how life is? They live on a living earth. And it would be even more impressive that they would have, just in the ways that their stories would start to unfold for them, a whole story of Gaia and Living Cities Earth, living earth, living education, and as you say, that their curiosity would be fed and nurtured. I'm really inspired by that. I see that Lev has also put in the chat some maybe distillations of thinking about the unitive narrative, as he's had a few days to consider this as we've been preparing for this session. Lev, did you want to make any comments about what you distilled from the unitive narrative?
Yes, absolutely, Jude. Thank you very much. And Marian, thank you for organizing and setting up this discussion. Jude, thank you for introducing the ideas from unitive narrative and how it all came to life. I'm looking at our backgrounds, if you see, and Jude has a lot of books in the background, Marilyn as well. Marina has some books. I have none, as you see. I'm a simple man. And thinking about I'm totally in line and agree with all the key principles which I personally explored and found in the unitive narrative. And as I see, we want to make it a foundational worldview, or we would love to have this unitive narrative as a foundation for the worldview for many, many people. I think it's about 8 billion now, right, on the planet Earth. And as I know, most people don't have as many books in the background as Marilyn or Jude, and maybe around Marina's size, or some are closer to mine. And people who are very active in changing systems very often are, I would call them action leaders, and they are not necessarily thought leaders. So for them to be able to incorporate the ideas of the unitive narrative into their sort of perspective, into their life, many of them would have 1 minute to understand it and one sentence to express it when they talk to their constituencies. So it's a question both to Jude and to Marilyn and to Marina. If you had this famous elevator speech, or even less, right? So 15, 20, 30 seconds, of course, it's a reduction, but also it's a distillation of essence. In one sentence or in two sentences, if you talk to people who would not be able to hold all of the considerations expressed in the unitive narrative, how would you personally express the essence of it so it could reach the other person from different cultural backgrounds, different language, backgrounds, and all that? Would be very interesting to hear your take on it. Jude?
Thanks, Lev, for that question. Before I invite Jude to take you up on that, I would just like to hear you speak to some of the essences that you distilled out of it, because you gave yourself the challenge of the elevator speech. So just give us a few of the top points that you picked out.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned in the text, and I was basically sitting with several documents, both the unitive narrative itself and some which came out of it or based on it. And I was really trying to understand, for me personally, what are the essential points. And this is not necessarily what I would tell or how I would tell it to different people. But number one, and I think it's very important that all of those points are based both on the new sort of scientific breakthroughs and scientific evidence from quantum physics to other physical and other theories. And what comes out from it is that we are all interconnected. And I think it's very important because for centuries, people lived feeling that we are all separate. I am separate from Jude, Jude is separate from Marilyn. And so we need to take care of ourselves or our families at most. Very few people think larger about the cities, countries, and nations, etc. And so the first one for me is we are all part of one reality, which is not a mechanistic sort of reality, but it's a living, complex living, let's call it ecosystem. And because we are so intricately interconnected, we could be like one big family. So one family is a good image to me, if I'm thinking about how to distill everything into one. So we are one family, but it's not only about humans, that we as humans are one family, but it's also with all forms of life, with animals and with plants and etc., etc. And there is a certain, it's like a soup, right? There is a soup in which different vegetables, etc., are floating, and the soup, this how it's called, the liquid thing, it's basically the field of consciousness, which many people already feel and are aware of, right? The universal consciousness, but many people are not aware of it. So for them, reality is very mechanistic. So to make the long story short, so we are part of a living, evolving, conscious universe. That would be number one for me. And we are one family. We're interconnected in the sense that not only we, but all is interconnected. So our inner perspectives, our inner reality is not separate from our outer reality. And we need to take it into account as we run our lives and do different, things. And also thinking about different levels, right? The level of a person, individual person, the level of a community or collective, the ecosystem, for example, or a city or a bioregion, and then the planet as a whole. So there are connections, and we need to think about those connections as we act. Also, my understanding is that unity, as Marilyn mentioned, it's not maybe Jude said it, it's not uniformity, but it's a unity in diversity. So we might be all come in different shapes and forms, but there is something unifying all of us, this sort of field of life. And as we recognize this unity and diversity, it allows us to manifest new power. So it's not just thoughts which run in our head, but it's really the sensed energy which allows us, as Marilyn said, to manifest love in action, to do things, to change things. That was number 3 for me. And I also distill that to thrive as humans, as ecosystems, we need to learn how to take care of oneself, to be able to take care of other people, let's say, so that together we can take care of our ecosystems, right? If we're weak, if we are sort of hardly surviving, we are not able to really take care of larger systems. So that was number 4 for me. And skipping to the last one, as you remember, the Beatles said, love is all you need. Well, I put it, universal love is all we need, both as a state of mind, right? How we feel, that we're universally connected and in sync with others, living beings, but also as a source of action. So sorry for being very long. That's why I ask more wiser sort of people to give a shorter and more distinct sort of essence of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lev, for doing so much work on that. Jude, I'm going to ask you if there's anything that you would like to comment or respond to that, and then I'm going to build a little bridge forward from the unitive narrative that you've presented into how we're starting to apply it. So Jude, how would you respond to Lev's essences?
With gratitude. I mean, I think they're very beautiful, and they very much align with everything I would say. There's just for me, the grounding is that, as Lev said, we now understand that our entire universe meaningfully exists and purposefully evolves as a unified, conscious, living entity. So that for me is the grounding of all of it, because within that unity is indeed the diversity that we speak to. I think the other thing to add is that as again Lev said, when we consider the unitive narrative in action, for me it's very important that what this enables us to do is to expand our circles, our spirals of compassion beyond the me, to include the we and to include the all. And that all is essentially universal. And with that is love. That is the basis of that not just compassion, but that experience, not just understanding, but experience that we're inseparable, that we are part of this wonderful, glorious planetary home Gaia and the entire universe. And then finally, again, perhaps guiding us in our love in action, the whole worldview, we talk about act local, feel global, think cosmic. Because that then brings us into that biggest of pictures, but it also brings us back into the what is in front of me, what is next to me, what is with me, and then expand that understanding. And ultimately, love is all we need.
Thank you so much, Jude. I noticed that Marina has her hand up. So Marina, before I move on, I invite you to make your comment.
Yes, thank you. I would like maybe to add, share my experience. I had an opportunity to present at the TEDx conference last year, and love and abundance was the main topic of my speech. And I was thinking about how I can describe this unitive narrative, how I can make simple people who maybe not so spiritual, help them to understand this unitedness, this interconnectedness of everything on the earth. And I suggested the metaphor of the body. What if we are all the cells of the great body, maybe planetary body, maybe universal body? And we all know that healthy cells are living to provide and to contribute to the health of the organism. But there are cancer cells which consume, which compete, which take the resources from all other cells and from the organism itself. And in order not to be the cancer cell, we have to make a choice every step, every breath, every minute, every second of our life. Whether you serve, whether you contribute, whether you bring all your passion and all your love to this unity, to this health, to this happiness of all the organism, or you decide to be the cancer cell and all the organism will eventually die because of you, because of your choices. And that is what it's a rather straightforward and maybe even so threatening metaphor. But many people came to me and said that this helped them to understand their opportunity to be their servant cells, to be the servant parts of the communities. And I think that love, which all we need, is some sort of the blood or maybe a plasma which connects and nurtures and gives life to all these cells into the organism itself. So in short, I think that this metaphor could be very compelling for many people about the wholeness and interconnectedness. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. That's really beautiful because I get the image of symbiosis as you're speaking, so that the living earth and all of our organs and cells connected through it, which is certainly how I think about living cities and integral city, is a very symbiotic relationship. Jude, would you be okay if I went on from this and started to talk a little bit about how I thought about the unitive narrative and how it would relate to city? That would be great. Thank you. So we actually have two initiatives for cities that have been inspired by the unitive narrative today. The first one is the Integral City, which is the organization that I started. And When I saw the initiative of the unitive narrative, when I saw that the unitive narrative opened up for me a whole bunch of doors that helped me think about how to connect the cities more deeply to Gaia. When I looked at the framework for the overall one that the SDGs and the evolutionary leaders had put together, I realized that there was a way of telling the story that basically outlined, first of all, what are the disasters that we actually have to take responsibility for. And I have also in the link that you can see in the PowerPoint that's on the screen, if you go there, you'll see that I've outlined those, but I don't need to spend a lot of time on that today because we've focused on a paradigm in the past that has not been regenerative. We haven't based our cities as thinking of them as being alive in nature and being connected to a living earth. But we certainly have multiplied ourselves through cities. And right now, we think that there may be about 10,000 cities on earth. We know there's more than 7 billion people. And there may be as many as 4.1 million places. So we know that in the developed world, more than 90% of humanity already lives in cities. And in the developing world, by 2030, 50% of the human population will live in cities. We also have been acutely reminded by everything from the IPCC to even the Pope that we live in a code red era and that we have, through our actions as humans, imperiled at least 9 major systems that the Earth depends on for her health and well-being. So what the unitive narrative brings to us is a way to think about how to make cities, how to what I call place care, not just place make, so that we can take into consideration the actions and the ways that we interact visibly on Earth, as well as the interobjective systems and structures that we've made that hold our cities together. But I think that we need to relate those in ways that show our intentions, our spirituality, as we mentioned earlier, and our consciousness and culture and how they connect with our actions and our structures. There's 4 of those elements there. So, a technical term might be it's tetra arising, but I think it is arising in unity is really how we really want to think about that they're all interconnected with each other. And Jude has done such a beautiful job as both a cosmologist and a scientist herself in many areas of showing that the planetary scientists are telling us that we really have to pay attention to the well-being of Gaia, of Earth. She is our mother, and we are utterly dependent on her. And when we take a unitive narrative as our cosmology for a city, then it's possible that we will have a unifying effect. I think of what Jude describes as something like an overview effect. This is what the astronauts called it when they came back from being off Earth and they could see below them a whole system that they felt viscerally in their heart and mind and spirit, that this was a wholeness that they were very much conjoined to, they're part of. And so we saw that we were connecting not just cities and Gaia, but within cities, all of the individuals, all of the groups, all of the connections that are interconnected there, and that we have a me, a we, and an all. So truly we have this unity, even in those diversities that are totally interconnected to one another. So what happened when we went on beyond Integral City to start to notice that we wanted to connect with organizations of organizations? We started to think about, I had Integral City translated into multiple languages, and one of them came back and said, well, in our language, it produces living cities. And we thought, well, that sounds like a really good way to think about what we'd like to bring together as a living cities Earth. So an umbrella that would hold multiple organizations, but that those organizations and those people would all be inspired by humans humaning well in harmony with nature, so that we've been evolved ourselves, I believe, by Gaia. As Marina was just pointing out, I think within Gaia, we could even say that cities are her organs, organizations are organelles, and individuals are cells. That would be maybe both a metaphor and an analogy to think about our interrelationship with life on Gaia. So the ways that we've been thinking in Living Cities Earth, which I will invite in a minute both Marina and Lev to speak to, is that we see that cities are complex and they're adaptive, they're living, they're spiritual human habitats. But we're not separate from nature. We are a human rhizome, if you will. And we have ways that interconnect us, and I like the term meshwork because it helps us see that we're both self-organizing and we're creating structures that must be life-giving in the ultimate ways that we continue to survive and thrive on Earth. We see, as Lev has mentioned, in the image that you can see on the screen, not only a living Earth, but that our ways of connecting individual people, individual persons to people, to places, to Gaia, those are like a nest of ways that we can care together. So that is something that I have also spoken of since we've mentioned in regards to the education, something we must consider unto the 7th generation. When I look behind us where we are today and think about all those ways we have imperiled Gaia, we could say that's 7 generations who haven't embraced a full view that Gaia is a living system that has a unitive narrative. And we can re-story now. We're in a position to completely rewrite that story and to think about 7 generations in front of us, which the Indigenous people say all decisions that are wise must be made in service to 7 generations ahead of us. And so when we think about all of the scales we're talking about, from Gaia, Earth herself, to our cities, our places, our organizations, our individuals and groups, all within the bioregion, this is a whole system of interconnected, loving, living, alive unities. So that is a little bit about how I have been dancing with this through the integral city narratives that I've been putting together. And in that process, when we started to initiate the Living Cities Earth, which has only been this summer, so we're only talking about an organization that's very young, that's still being midwifed into existence. And we found that the unitive narrative was something we could align around. We have over 25 people and organizations that have come together now. And now we're really being faced with, well, so how do we want to express ourselves in the world? How do we wish to be of service? And so I'm going to invite Marina and Lev to tell us that story. And perhaps the way that we can open that door is, Marina, would you like to set us up for watching a little video that this group created? And I think it helps to just bring the aliveness of unitive narrative to the screen, literally. Marina, would you like to set it up?
Would Kara please set it, because
Yes, Kara will play
yes,
it. Did
Kara.
you want to say anything before she starts?
Okay.
The context in
Yes.
which we actually produce this as Living Cities Earth.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think that it's an incredible organization which brought together very different people who are connected with this unitive narrative, this understanding of service to the Gaia, to the human cities, and to the humanity and all other species on the earth. And we define ourselves as the interdisciplinary action research network, which now connects more than 25 experts serving Gaia's well-being in different areas in absolutely different ways. And we have a goal, a very bold goal, to connect 10,000 cities, main cities which are the reflective organs of Gaia well-being. We are trying to connect people and thought leaders and action leaders from the 10,000 of cities in order to help them build these alive, spiritual, complex habitats which live healthy, wealthy, happy life in harmony with all the species which inhabit this territory, and in harmony with the earth itself, thinking of the future, as Marilyn said, for the 7 generations ahead. And I think that this approach in service, in co-creation, instead of the common understanding of competitiveness for resources, for wealth, for happiness itself. I think this new approach can bring people a new meaning in every life. And despite of their professional engagement, despite of the way of life, gender, culture, and many other things which bring our diversity, I think that the main aim is to co-create, to serve, and to bring this aliveness in all the processes, to understand that every our action is some sort of the prayer for happiness and for the thriving earth. So I think that we should look at our video and understand more about Living Cities Earth. Thank you.
Thanks, Marina. Thanks, Kara. Kara, I don't know if you can see, the image is not showing, so maybe you need to click on the share screen, the share video and share sound.
Yeah, sorry, it says my screen sharing's paused. I've just never had that before. Second. I'm just gonna stop the share and start again. Okay.
Thank you.
I must have hit something on my keyboard that's like a magic code. Okay, share screen. Ah, why is it doing this? I don't know. I don't think I can share it. Sorry, I'll see if I can figure it out and maybe we can come back to it at the end. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's a good practical way to do that. And
Okay.
so I would just invite Marina and Lev to come on, and let's have an exploration and sharing of how Living Cities Earth and all who are participating in it has come into being. Marina, you can unmute yourself, and Lev, come on to the contributions as well. Yeah, so how did you see that the unitive narrative has actually helped us with 25, lots of diversity in our unity? How has it helped us?
I could start, and Marina, if you add something. But before, let me ask you a technical question. When I was listening to Marilyn, I only saw all the time one first slide. Was it a different experience for everybody else? Or we all saw only the slide with the 4 hearts?
Yes,
And
we just saw one slide, Lev.
Okay.
Yes. So Kara is actually doing some fancy footwork in the background so that she's got the PowerPoint so that it's showing up as an image instead of turning off the images of people. So I think you had the same experience as me.
Okay, I was just thinking that perhaps then we could send the link because the presentation is so beautiful. I would love everybody to see it, even if post factum, so to say.
Oh, yes, we can.
So regarding the whole idea of unity of narrative and how we used it in the Living Cities Earth, I will actually take us maybe 10 years or 8 years back to 2014 or even 2013. And the reason is that at that time, I haven't heard of the unity of narrative yet, but I have read the book from Marilyn Hamilton about, it's called Integral City. And in essence, it also talks about how everything is interconnected on the level of a city, because we chose to work with this level of complexity which city represents. And in our very practical sort of way, we decided to start some programs in my native city of Izhevsk in Russia. And what we saw was a very interesting phenomena. I was living for about 15 years in different countries. Then my father died and I came back to my native city. And what I discovered is that when you look at the people sitting sort of in the kitchens, they are all extremely intelligent and smart and talented. And if those people were living in London or New York or Amsterdam or Paris, they would be sort of part of the elite, artistic elite, business elite, etc. So in the houses, there was a very high level of intelligence and talent, etc. But out in the social space, you didn't feel this energy. The city felt sort of frozen or half alive, or maybe 1/4 alive. And for me, it was a very unusual experience. And I felt that something is wrong. The energy, the life energy is not flowing, right? And so from this very sort of specific experience on the ground, we started to look as to how to start this flow of life energy in the city. And this was the time when we read Marilyn's book on integral city and how the city is a complex living system. So all the ideas which are represented also in the unity of narrative. And we started to apply those principles to our day-to-day life. And it gave us tremendous inspiration, not only on the level of thoughts and feelings, but also on the level of actions, because as we started to connect to each other using the phenomenon of love, the universal love, right? The sense, the living sort of sense that we are all part of this common living field, it led to a very practical and measurable results when we started to see how feeling united and being united and feeling interconnected and bringing this interconnectedness in all of our conversations, materials, and projects, we create a different level of engagement, different level of effectiveness, and different level of sort of results than other initiatives which we saw around, which would not use this sense of interconnectedness and unity and diversity, etc. And so just to give a few specific examples, we were very active doing this type of work for the first 15 months. Then we moved to a sort of, let's call it next level. But the 15 months of the initial stage, which we were practicing the principles of what we see now in the unity of narrative, we had about 320 events which happened in the city without any financial support from anybody. It was all sort of self-originated, and 320 events. Some of them were 100 people discussing the strategy of the city and how we sort of move into the future. But other events, it were they would include 15,000 people co-creating a city festival on health or on how to age well. And so what we saw So those were the events, but also we ran about 60 citywide projects, like transforming city libraries or creating a university for the third age, so people sort of 55 plus. I'm almost there, 48, and many others. And again, what's interesting is that all those projects, which were quite substantial, this University 55 plus is still active 8 years later, and thousands of people went through it for free. And all of those projects were run without any funding. This is what's very important. I'll get to this point. So no, let's call it government funding, not very substantial funding from large corporations. So it was all sort of crowd-funded. And when you think about it, you know, money is a form of energy. And so where all this energy came from, the organizational energy, the financial energy, it came from people who started to feel connected to each other and to all of life. There were a lot of ecological initiatives. And this sense of connectedness, right, from the mindset, the viewpoint, which we introduced at this time, and started to share with people, with the city officials, with entrepreneurs, with children, etc. So the sense of interconnectedness and unity in diversity, it was very palpable. Every day we sort of conducted those meetings, etc., and ran different projects, and it really was measured in those, you know, number of meetings people came together to discuss or solve some common issues, or in the specific projects and activities which were ran on a daily basis. And sort of the discovery reflecting on this that we came to was that there is this life energy always available to all of us. It's always available. And number one, we need to recognize it, right? It helps. It would run even without formal recognition, but still, it's nice to be aware of it, that we are not just separate bodies, but we are sort of floating in the, you know, in the soup of universal energy. And love is the key. Sort of when we open our hearts, when we open our sense of belongingness and connectedness, somehow this energy becomes more available to all of us individually and collectively. And that was a beautiful example, which really, even now, 8 years later, and then we started to, you know, spread it and share it with people in other cities and other countries. But this very specific example, even before going to our Living Cities Earth initiative, was really a test of how those universal principles really work in daily life, and they work 100%. So I'll pass it on to Marina. Marina is also an amazing person who researched as a researcher and also practiced the principles of how to
You've
create
somehow
happy
muted yourself.
How to create happy societies, right? How to create happy communities. What are those you know, tools and instruments and approaches and principles we could use to increase our level of happiness? So Marina, I pass it on to you, and if you could share your experiences within Living Cities Earth, but also outside, would be very interesting. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I would like to ask whether I will speak or we will look at the video and then continue. What would be best?
Thanks. I will just have to ask Kara to respond to that, as she has control of the video.
Great.
Yes, not yet. Still haven't figured that out. So.
Okay. Thank you, Kara. We're appreciating that you're actually graphically responding as we're talking. So it's very nice to see you in action. Thank you. Marina, go ahead.
Yes. Great, and we're now experiencing a living process of changing the consequence of our species. But I think that all is to the best. I work with the communities and I work with the city mayors in the area of creating communities and territorial development based on their interconnectedness, on their collaboration of common dwellers, businessmen and people from the corporations, local authorities, and social organizations. And their main idea is when people only try to develop their needs, only try to be satisfied in their aspirations, this situation will never end, because we have endless wishes, endless aspirations, and endless demands. And this, we call it happiness of consumption, is rather dependent on the resources and rather destructive for the relations on all levels. And when we discovered that we could arise interest and inspiration in people in co-creating something meaningful, in caring for their yards, their houses, their neighborhoods, their communities, their organizations and cities itself. So we understood that this happiness of creation and care give people much more satisfaction, much more inspiration, and much more understanding of the purpose of their lives. And being connected to the local communities, to their teams, to their organizations, to their territories, and being proud of being dwellers, being citizens of these territories, gives that sense of connectedness and attachment to these territories. And I think that this, the main idea is when we make this transition from the mechanical understanding of the city as some mechanisms, some machines, some processes, some consumptions of resources, and achieving some profits. When we transfer and look at our refocus to the vision of the city as a living organism, maybe as an ecosystem, we start to understand that we can transition from this separatedness, detachment, and competition to the co-creation, to the collaboration, to the interconnectedness, and to the wholeness and understanding of this feeling of being the part of something bigger, something beautiful, something meaningful, something really great for the people's life. And in this situation, building this co-creation, building this collaboration, we start realizing that we don't have deficiency. There is no shortage of some resources, because we can add our efforts, join our efforts in order to create something meaningful, and the resources we begin to live in the abundance and sufficiency. And it's the new paradigm of living in these communities. And at the end, I would say that from these lonely, separated, confused pieces, we finally can come to real peace, real life, real joyful and creative interbeing with one another. And we managed to find the methodology in order to provide the survey, which helps us to understand their perception of their citizens, of their quality of life, and their realization of their creation potential for co-creation. We ask people not only whether they are ready to have to demand to satisfy some of their needs. Are they satisfied with their conditions which are created for them? But we also engage people in co-creation, new meanings, new resources, new communities, new connections, and this brings some therapeutical effect, I believe, that people start to understanding that being connected, being co-creative, being caring for each other and for the place where they live, it brings them lots of happiness, lots of satisfaction, lots of understanding that their lives, they live in, are not in vain. They have this new meaning, and so I think that this is the narrative, the unitive narrative in action, how it realizes on the real territories, their local communities come together in collaboration with the local authorities, businessmen, social organizations, and they start building their new understanding on how to human well on their territories. And that's a very inspiring stories. So we are going to collect these stories, these best practices, these beautiful cases from 10,000 cities from all over the world in order to inspire different places, different countries, and in order to build this new level of interconnectedness, belongingness, and understanding that being a human is being a loving creator, not a consumer, not a competitor, not a rebeller or warrior. I think that this could impact a lot to the global community, global understanding of what is to be a human. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Your emotions and energy from the happiness background really come through, and I really appreciate the smile on the screen that I see. So I would like to invite Jude back into the discussion because, Jude, we started out with how you had framed the unitive narrative, and now we've heard how I looked at it from an integral city perspective and said, oh, I think that I can see how to apply it to cities in general, and then the Living Cities Earth opportunity came along, and so we started to actually apply this to making proposals to others. So Jude, you've heard from both Lev and Marina, as well as myself. What happens when you see something that you conceived of maybe on a theoretical or maybe even intellectual basis, when you see it come alive with others?
Thanks, Marion. Well, both Lev and Marina are inspirational, as you are. And I love how the unitive narrative is actually underpinning and framing love in action, because that was always its aim. You know, many years ago, Lev said he'd never heard of the unitive narrative 8 years ago. I hadn't heard of it 8 months ago because it came out of this almost evolutionary impulse to remember we're inseparable, to remember we're unified and unity and diversity. And so as it came through, I think the other co-authors, there are 13 of us that came together as part of the SDG Thought Leaders Circle initially to draft it. And all of us felt that we didn't write it, it wrote us. We actually felt a universal evolutionary impulse flowing through us, and us serving that impulse, you know, tuning and aligning with what that impulse could not just remind us of who we really are, but re-heart us of who we really are as cosmic, microcosmic co-creators of this wonderful universe soul, this living, evolving, glorious adventure we call our universe, and also our planetary home Gaia. So to see this now becoming beyond an understanding, but actually now being grounded in experiencing and embodying unitive awareness and unitive narrative founded love in action and transformation action. I'm just, my heart overspills, my soul, you know, fills with joy. And I do feel that this is our time to do this together, you know, to link up and lift up together to what my dear friend, Dr. Julie Kroll, who co-founded The Good of the Whole says, so that we can level up and light up together. And I think the unitive narrative is showing us that we can, you know, wake up, grow up, show up, as Marilyn well knows, Ken Wilber also says, to do this, to clean up from the trauma of that misperception and come together to link and lift and level and light up. And for me, you know, this is where our choice, our moment of choice to do so, serves our conscious evolution, so that we can literally move into what I've always perceived as the potential of a cosmic destiny to become co-creative, co-evolutionary partners with our entire planetary home, Gaia, and our entire universe. And the other thing I'd like to complete on is, as Lev was talking about this field of consciousness, what this emergent cosmology of a conscious, living, evolving universe also reveals is its multidimensionality, and that Gaia as a sentient being is multidimensional, so that we have an opportunity. When I say link up and lift up, I'm really talking about the entirety of that multidimensional consciousness, where we are students, where we are learners from a wisdom that is far greater than ours at this point in time. And so to both remember that wholeness and also humbly and heart openly and mind openly open ourselves up to that wisdom and that evolutionary impulse that is our natural heritage and is our natural potential future.
Thank you, Jude. I love the remembering. That was what was occurring to me as I was listening to all three of you, is that this new story in many ways is a story that has been flowing through the whole evolutionary journey of Gaia into the evolution of humans. And we have to reconnect, remember, remind, re-heart, re-embody. So it's like really beautiful way for us to maybe bring ourselves into a landing zone here. Kara, I see, said that she had figured out the little video. That might be a thing that we could put in now, if that's possible. And if not, Kara, could you just let me know if you're able to show that video now?
All right, let's go for it.
Okay, because I think that it will be an example of the remembering.
I'll remember how to share my screen. Okay.
We are humans.
In this VUCA Bani world,
Okay.
Oops,
what does
no video.
Ugh.
Kara, maybe you could share the link in the chat, and I will start it from my computer.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I thought I had it, but I guess I didn't. Okay.
Okay. So we'll just pause a moment for a little technical connection to be made and sending it all kinds of positive energies. Meanwhile, I'll point out that Kara has been doing a graphic representation for us. She has been remembering us as we've been speaking. So thank you, Kara, for that. And I would invite you to just maybe pause and consider what is the essence that you're taking away. How have we made peace from pieces? How has the unitive narrative brought some new insights for us today in what we're all called to do? Marina, did you want to start and then Liv? As I will just, we may not get to this. This video may have other designs today, so we'll just hold the possibility that what we may do is just put a link into the chat. So Marina, what is the essence of the unitive narrative that you're taking away today?
Could I pass my word to somebody else, and I will. I'm trying to find the link. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Beautiful.
Uh,
Lev, you have something that you'd like to share.
Well, I'm extremely inspired and excited. Actually, it's 5 o'clock now in the morning here on the West Coast, and as we discussed, as we had 15 minutes before the session started, where we sort of connected with all the speakers, and then almost 1 hour and a half altogether here. And I'm really grateful for this very short experience of 1-2 hours spent together, because when I'm connected, interconnected inside, at the same moment, I feel interconnected with all of us, with Jude, with Marilyn, with Marina, with Cara, with Nancy, with Seb, with Kurt, with everybody who is present today, or actually who will be watching, the video recording later on. So it's interesting how my inner state immediately creates this interconnectedness in the quote-unquote outer reality. So this is number one. When I'm connected inside, I'm connected outside. And this is also part of the unitive narrative, if I understood correctly, reading it and listening to Marilyn and Jude. So that's number one. So I am responsible for what goes on in my life by managing my inner state. Number two, of course, thanks to the Beatles, to all the spiritual traditions, to the modern science, love is all you need, or universal love is all we need. So that's my second takeaway point. I had it as I was coming into the session, but now I have it more deeply sort of, spread around my body in all of my cells and fabrics, etc. So universal love is all we need. And number three, and I'll finish here to give space to other people, it all could be very practical, right? So, of course, we start with the ideas, and for me, ideas are more important than action, but we recognize that without action, we would only float in the subtle worlds, and we are also present for some reason in this very practical reality. And so I think that as we take specific parts from the unitive narrative and start applying them in our daily life, in our families, with our friends, with our colleagues, in our communities, we really could get more and more successful experiences, which give us understanding and subtle understanding of how to apply this worldview to every situation in our life, whether we need to resolve a conflict with our neighbor, or to create some project with our colleagues, or to manage the whole city life, or even help our planet to evolve in a more sort of sustainable and regenerative fashion. So to finish it up, interconnectedness between what's inside and what's outside. Number two, universal love is all we need. And number three, practice unitive narrative in very specific life situations. I'm very inspired and grateful to all of us. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Lev. It's inspiring to know that we've woken you up for a whole day ahead. Yeah. Marina, can I invite you now?
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for being the part of this healing conversation, truly healing, because I think that speaking and feeling and practicing a unitive narrative, this understanding of being, interbeing, caring and loving on our planet is a really a remedy for the human beings and for many, many problems which we have to experience nowadays. And I think that this being connected despite of the borders, despite of the geopolitical situations and so on, it's a really important and very inspiring process. And I have already said healing process, helping people to stay connected, stay humans, stay loving species, and staying those who will nurture our planet but not destroy it. I think that it's very important nowadays, and I deeply appreciate all your love, all your support, all your warm words which were told and written today in this chat. And I would like to suggest all of us not to say goodbye, and to stay connected, and to stay to continue promoting and sharing this unitive narrative in our organizations, in our teams, with our relatives, with all people whom we could reach out via internet or in our interpersonal communications, because the more people find out about the new paradigm, the new vision of the world, and the new vision of our interrelations, the sooner we will manage to provide new, healthy, happy, prosperous life on our dear mother planet Earth.
Thank you, Marina. I know that what I'm taking today away is certainly the inspiration that the unitive narrative is not only for bringing full aliveness to our cities, living cities, Earth, but it's inspiring. It brings peace even in contemplating it. The remembering is a unity that is living, and that the symbiosis of all of our interconnections has really made me feel really connected across the whole planet today. So thank you very much. And I'd like to invite Jude to have our last word.
Thank you, everyone. And for me, the unitive narrative is about understanding and inviting us to experience and to embody unitive awareness. And so I'll quote two good friends, amongst other good friends on this, Dr. Julie Krull again, that says, unity isn't just an ideal, it's real. And Dr. Joni Carley, who says, unity isn't an aspiration, it's our existential reality. So we now have this incredible underpinning and framing, empowering, inspiring, nurturing, inviting us to remember who we really are and the wholeness of all that is. And I'm incredibly excited because it feels to me, I'm a great believer in perfect timing. And for me, the unitive narrative is both an idea whose time has come, but the time whose idea has come. But it's far more than an idea. It is truly the evidential basis of wholeness, of oneness, that gives us strength and empowers us in serving transformational change and for the good of the whole.
Thank you so much, Jude. Being in Scotland and singing Taizé and having Gaelic blessings, I'd like to offer to conclude today a blessing of the unitive narrative for peace. It's based on an old Gaelic blessing, and it goes like this. Deep peace of... I'm sorry, Marina?
Sorry, I thought that you have finished. Can I try to start the video? It would be very great if we could watch it at the
Okay,
end.
how about I give us the blessing and then we'll try the video.
Oh,
okay? Okay, so here's the blessing, and may it apply to the video as well. A blessing of the unitive narrative for peace. Deep peace of the evolutionary flow to you. Deep peace of the living earth to you. Deep peace of the city's voice to you. Deep peace of the story that unites to you. Thank you, everyone. Blessing. And may we be blessed, maybe, as a grand finale for this little video. Go ahead, Marina. Give it a try.
Can you see the
I can see. I can see, but yep. Can't hear, though. So when you do it, when you do the share screen, you have to click on the two little buttons. One says share sound, and the other says share video. And I don't think you have the share sound on.
You have to stop share and start again.
Share sound and share video. Okay. Can you see it?
Not yet. It says you've started though. Yes, we see.
Right?
Humans.
And we hear.
In this VUCA Bani world, what does it mean to be human? How can we human well?
How can each human feel truly alive?
How can each community and city thrive and evolve?
How can 10,000 cities on our planet interconnect for our collective benefit?
How can we live in harmony with all life on Earth?
These are the questions that brought us together at Living Cities Earth, a very young and fast-growing global collective that started 3 months ago. We are a horizontally organized action community of 25 of the world's leading integral researchers and practitioners, with a total of 300 years of research and leadership that has benefited millions of people in over 1,000 cities. Living Cities Earth interconnects both people and institutions that together reach over 100 countries on all continents. Our aim is to integrate our capacities to human well with 10,000 cities serving Gaia's well-being, and to discover how can we nurture cities as complex, adaptive, living, spiritual human habitats in the right relationship to humans, bioregions, all other cities, and the planet. To do that, we must not only learn but also unlearn, to create space for new ways of knowing, doing, and interbeing in the 5 dimensions of person, people, place, places, and planet. What exactly are these 5 areas that form our testing grounds? First, it is Earth with all forms of life. Second, a naturally emerging network of 10,000 cities. Third, each individual city as a living ecosystem. Fourth, our communities. And fifth, each individual person. On each level, we will explore what we have to learn and unlearn in order to human well. These 2 streams of research as yin and yang represent a full circle of life. As critical and complex this inquiry is, it calls for a radical and diverse set of research methods, from action research to mapping, from ULab to artistic inquiry, and well beyond. We are both dreamers and doers, and plan to present our findings in many ways. From a series of maps and LCE Global Journal to cartoons and living project templates, from a global forum for 1,000 cities to an academy for mayors and young leaders, art exhibitions, and a living journal of unlearning. And we realize that the very idea of a traditional journal may well be something we'll need to unlearn. We bring all of our inspiration, competencies, and resources to this project.
We trust that by acting together, now and in the future,
We can learn to human well and help millions of people live happier lives.
In harmony with each other.
On all life on Earth.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kara, and thank you, Marina, for working technically so that we managed to get all that diversity into a unity of presentation. And I invite everyone to have a look at Kara's beautiful graphic. And Kara, maybe you can give yourself the full benefit of that screen. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Cara. Thank you, Lev. Thank you, Marina. Thank you, everyone, for a wonderful gathering.
Thank you, Jude. Beautiful. Thank you, Kara. I think we can finish the